When you ask people, well, how was your last chatbot experience? And usually you see a face which is super unhappy. Then you ask them, how was your last ChatGPT experience? And then they smile like, that's a really helpful tool. And this is the same thing we're seeing right now from that shift in the industry from, I learned how to get away from that chatbots in the fastest way to, it's actually really helpful. So just name an example, Barmenia, so the German health insurance. When they introduced AI agents, the NPS went up 180%. So not because the humans aren't great. No, of course they are great, but it just takes a lot of time to get there.
Welcome to AI Catch Up, the podcast catching up with the tech products that matter in the AI era.
Hi everyone, welcome to the AI Catch Up podcast. My name is Elina, and today I'm having a very, very special guest. Stefan Ostwald is the co-founder and the chief AI officer at Parloa, the company that has been building voice AI systems across various companies and has recently reached a unicorn status. And that is why I'm extremely glad to have Stefan on the show to tell his story and also to share the magic of how he has managed to go from voice AI back then, 2017, right? And then going up to the point of voice assistants and discussing the future of this technology. Stefan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
I definitely should start with congratulating on the last funding round of Parloa. And it is the announcement that I have partially gotten from the background. I have seen how busy you all were in the process of getting it through. So definitely congrats on amazing work on that front.
Thanks, Alina. This is in the end a team effort. You're only successful together. It's really then when everything comes together, you can reach these milestones. But it's always still day zero, right? Nothing is done yet. We're eager to really still shape that world. So it's always day zero also now.
I love you saying that. At the same time, if I would see your day zero, it would be probably back to 2016, 2017. So that was back then the time when you actually founded the company, which was called Future of Voice, as far as I know. And 16, no one was thinking about voice AI. So how have you felt while betting on the technology back then when, Alexa and Siri weren't operating as we are having them now? And what have you thought back then?
Well, back then I thought, it's so exciting that you can now talk with machines. So it was really that human side which fascinated us. It was the time when speech-to-text technology, just on the popular benchmarks, reaching human-level benchmarks. What was fascinating to me was you can, as a human, so easily pronounce all your problems in natural language. And so when now all of a sudden the machine can learn your language, you interact with it just like you do with a coworker. And that was super exciting. I have to admit, it changed a bit over time. So initially, it was really just that human side which fascinated me. And over time, I noticed something else. It was along when the instruction tree came out, right, when all these AI agents starting to emerge. I noticed natural language is the interface to AI. So if you want to interact with these new characters, well, you have a conversation with them. And so it's also just a tool to interact with that new type of technology, which is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, so voice as a certain way of communicating with LLMs, I can grasp that. But if you are looking into your journey in the last almost 10 years, what do you think are other important things to think about if you are planning to build a unicorn?
Yeah, planning to build a unicorn, that's of course a good plan. The reality is a startup journey is usually not so linear. So it goes quite some ups and downs. And I guess in each of these phases, usually you have some insights. I can share some of our story. Maybe they're helpful for others. So the first, well, we noticed we were fascinated by the modality that you can interact with machines using voice, but we didn't really know the key problem we were experiencing. So what we did back then was we started Future of Voice. Future of Voice was an agency for conversational experiences, and it helped us to learn what are the problems companies have, and on the other hand, what is right now actually feasible. And so we were initially a lot focusing on the different assistant systems like Alexa and Google Assistant, but of course we were talking with customers from all kinds of areas. And a key learning for us was that for quite a while, we were in a nice to have category. all the Alexas are nice to have. But the real pain they were sharing was in the customer service. All these millions of phone calls reaching them, and they're just really struggling to ramp up their internal agents who often are not there for so long. So all the operational burden they have to go through to train them again. For us, that actually is a key insight. So we adjusted our market, and that shift of the market was actually the missing ingredient to our product market fit. And it's so cliche, but ever since also our revenue, like let's say, to be honest, 5 months after, roughly a sales cycles later, you see the hockey stick starting. So while I've read it so often in books, I did not experience that. I did not expect that would actually happen. So that was the first key adoption in our cycle.
Was customer feedback you have observed that the signals that you need to be focusing on is not exactly the existing assistants of Alexa and also Google Assistant, right? But rather the general application of voice in certain operations that were more often coming, probably something like customer support. Is that correct?
That's correct. So essentially the channel through which we expose these customer experiences, they were not right nailing the most important problem of the customer. And whenever you talk with a customer, you have a certain framing, but of course you also ask more general. So what is it right now your challenges are? And that's then how we learned, actually, we need to change to a different channel where they have this much bigger pain point.
Even though you have described that you have experienced something like hockey stick moment described in the books, at the same time, books generally tell you that you can't be fascinated by technology. You should start with the problem. And it was still for you that you have been starting with the technology itself. And since it is fascinating and it is having lots of application, you have found your way.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah, we did start with the technology, and we were looking actually more for a problem. And by having an agency, really exploring hands-on what customers had. So we had a framing from that agency. But in the end, you can only be successful if you really nailed that problem. And that was also the shift for us. So the problem being on these assistants is not so essential, but the problem getting your contact center up to the status you want it to have, really the service level you want to deliver, that's a real problem. And that's also where they are willing to put a lot of effort and money into it to make that really successful, because they know the relationship with their customer, that's essentially what their brand loyalty increases.
Reading impressive case studies from Decathlon, from Eon, from Payback, from FitOn, already working with Parloa. So apparently you have nailed also the enterprise level of integration of the technology, which is definitely something that can't be underestimated and something that requires years to be scaled and brought to the companies. What are other things that you see from the traction with the customers that help you stand out on crowded, not crowded market of voice assistants?
No, that's a really good point. In the end, you need to deliver really what they care about. One step back, with a key insight along the way was when you think of the value proposition to help to automate, semi-automate contact centers, that was clear. And back in that day, the entire industry was still structured around a way that you predefine how a conversation can flow. But with more conversations with the customer, they were asking for, well, I need this configuration way and this configuration way for the product offering we had back then. The underlying need was, I need to have outstanding customer experiences in a way where it can handle all the messiness of real conversations, which is a different kind of solution. So we were then switching to an AI agent-based approach. So it's a bit like Henry Ford, right, who has this famous quote when asking people what they wanted. They said, well, I want a faster horse. But in reality, well, they wanted cars, right? They want to get from A to B. And so for us, that technological shift from these rule-based approaches to AI agents, it's really what created the excitement and to deliver that value. And so to your question again, there's that category of exciting, which usually have your great demos, your experiences, which are human-like, and they inspire. They're great. And then you have, though, also other things which may be not so exciting, but really critical. And to me, at least, the Kano model is a bit helpful. So I just mentioned the exciters. Then you have the performance features. For us, for example, that's you need to put yourself in the life of an operator who runs that AI agents supported contact center. And they have a lot of challenges around lifecycle management, versioning, testing, evaluating. So how to make them successful. And finally, you have all these basic features, which are maybe not so sexy, but critical in an enterprise environment. Security, reliability, all these things which are so critical for if you want to have a really secure system. So to be the safe bet in that ecosystem. And I think what for us has been really helpful is to not only have this great solutions like you have also for many other especially fresh starting companies, but also bring that reliability and safety in. And all that in a context where enterprises, they are in a big ecosystem. It's a big system. They have many other partners they work with. They have an entire IT ecosystem. And so thinking in partners as opportunities, how can we win better together? And this combination, our really partner-based approach, is resonating really well with these larger enterprises who see just a complex challenge also they need to address.
And is it also something that you have anyhow reflected in your first agreements in terms of pricing for your services, the more performance-based approach, when you're not just using the consumption hours of a certain speech-to-speech model or speech-to-text model, but also the aspect of how many conversations were successful?
Yeah, it's a really interesting approach to have a more success-based pricing. We're looking into this one. It's more an alignment in reality that it's defining success on a high level is easy, but when you really need to make it auditable, this is hard because there are many questions. So you have one you got perfectly right, for another one, maybe you need to hand over to a human. So if you look at it from that really contractual side, it's getting tricky and then all of a sudden also less interesting for our customers. So for now, we have found that consumption is still the best proxy for value delivery. While it's not perfect, at least that's what's most liked by our customers so far.
That is definitely the case. It is rather difficult to have the attribution for what is successful and what is not. To highlight you transitioning from more of CTO, CPO role, and then right now going into Chief AI Officer role. So you've been looking into traditional CTO tasks, but now you're fully focusing on AI tasks. Do you want to share something with the listeners on your learnings for the internal operations that have helped you succeed?
So the key topic is as a founder, while your title might not change, the reality is your job changes all the time. If you're in the beginning and you're maybe 10 people and you need to get something actually in front of customers and you need to win customers on that fresh startup, the challenges you face is so different than when you are 300 people and you really care about how to scale up an organization. So while from the outside, it looks like my job has just changed once, in reality, it has changed every 6 months completely. And so when you think about your own job, I think or about everybody's jobs, I think it's helpful to decompose it into two parts. So the first one is what is needed for a certain role from now on. When you double your org size every year, when you triple the amount of customers you have every year, what brought us to a certain step might not bring us to the next step. So it's not about the continuation necessarily. It's always about thinking, what is the key challenge? So for us, for example, scaling a tech organization, just the engineering and product side from 100 to 300 to 1,000 people is a different challenge than from 0 to 100. And what is the key aspects, the skills you need, and where can you get them? Do you develop this internally? Do you get somebody with that experience set into the game? And so this is what the company needs. So don't rely on past successes, but always think, what is the next step you need? And the other one is, how can you align the personal interest with the interest of the company? And so, for example, I'm super passionate about AI. I think it's so fascinating what's going on right now in this world. And we're just starting to see that fundamental shift of the industry towards AI. And this is what I just deeply care about. So that means also I don't care in the same amount about organizational improvements, which you need when you look at 100 to 1,000 people. It's, however, and that's where the personal and the company interests meet. That meant for me, looking for somebody who can run technology, engineering, somebody who can run product, so I can focus on that past where I'm most excited about, and where I also see this will be the most ambiguous topic for Parloa. And that's, as a founder, it's often helpful if you establish paths that's easier for somebody external to jump on, where there's high ambiguity. that's usually something helpful where a founder can help. And so for me, it's a wonderful shift. I'm really looking forward now to dive in, to experience hands-on more and more all the challenges, and bring also all the great research which is out there in a setting that it really delivers value for our customers.
How many people are you now?
In total, we are 350.
And from what amount of people to what amount of people was it the most challenging for you? In terms of scaling, as you mentioned, in terms of your own effort, in terms of managing new Parlonians, shall we call or
Parloans, we call them Parloans, indeed.
Parloans, yeah.
Parloans. I think the biggest challenge was around when we were roughly maybe 50, because initially you're all in a big room, you just everybody just knows what's going on with like everybody knows each other, and all of a sudden you get multiple levels of hierarchy, more silos. You can't just physically sit in a room anymore, and so you need to change a lot in how you operate, how you align around goals, and how you create also that combination of freedom and accountability, so we eventually end up with the same goal. And just the way communication is done, goal alignments are there, how you can create autonomy for people is really different when you don't know what everybody's doing every day and they know all the context anyway already, but you need to explicitly help to communicate the context and what's actually behind the different decisions and infos in customers.
And then talking about something that I have partially heard about from you when it comes to this way of mapping the technological structure to the organizational structure and also to product structure. How was it happening for you, especially when you say on the point of 50 people, probably when it was not anymore possible for you to get the overview of all pull requests, but then you needed to have a certain organizational approach there?
Yeah, you make a good point. So often what we see is the Conway's law, right? So you build your org structure, and then all of a sudden you see that your architecture kind of follows that, the same principles. And we've also seen that over time, so we of course needed to over and over change our org structure, but most recent one was beginning of this year, where we also noticed we kind of slowing down what's going on. And the underlying challenge was that features were touching way too many teams to actually be out there to reach a customer. And so what we did was we did not start with the org structure, but instead we looked at what is our product offering or the offerings we have. How can we, from a product perspective, create well-rounded top-level domains which have a clear interface, which create also then the autonomy within that interface for the teams, which is really helpful to decentralized decision-making and scaling independently for these different segments, and then reorg around this architecture. And for us, that has paid off. And I can also just recommend this approach to first think, what is your product? And to just continue to look at your product in a new way, especially in startups. Grow automatically. If you don't change, you will end up in a solution which is likely not the right fit for that state of the company at that given moment.
And have you gathered also certain learnings when it comes to automating processes in this review of various flows in the company, between product, between teams, what your vision is like?
I think you touch a really important point. I see so much change right now and just the way we work. Now AI is all over, right? It can do so many, especially these annoying things for us. It can help us collect so much more data. Look through all these support requests and help what is now helpful for my current feature set, or building something where you develop, right? You always have your AI on the side and you're always pair programming. So many things about how information flows, how information is also augmented, contextualized, and then also put into value. It's so wild. I love that time we're in. And we're also just scratching the surface. If we talk again in the 2-3 years, the work environment will have again changed so drastically. And I think exactly it is that shift which is just happening, which is also fueling all the automation when you look at customer service. So I'm super fascinated by the time we're in, and we're looking forward to explore that further.
But do you have a certain vision on how the new AI companies will be created in 2025 and onwards? And what I specifically think about is that in your case, it was the flow of being in the service space, providing exceptional service, learning directly from customers, understanding exactly where strategically something that you are building is fitting in. understanding which exact aspects or which exact killer features could be brought into the product that right now is Parloa. Would you think that this flow will be different for the new emerging companies? Do you think that we will have less products and at the same time the companies will be doing more in-house, for example, while creating their own AI agents or whatever we call it?
I still think some things stay true. You need to nail the essence of the need, for example. And you probably need to incrementally reach that state. I think what will be really different is how you reach that state. Right now, there's a lot of human labor involved. Pretty much all these steps are really driven by humans, from the customer research to building the product to communicating, and there's more on the marketing side. And what I see right now also from especially the really small startups is that you can already now, just with AI support, not get the 100% quality, but maybe get the 70% quality, but fully automated. And I think over time, we will increase the quality through a better AI, through better tooling. So a lot of the work can be nearly automated or completely automated. So I think we will be so much more productive. And I think there will be fewer humans who just execute. There will be much more stronger key people who orchestrate that, who in the end have a better decision, which is more informed by AI. But I still think it's right now, for the foreseeable future, humans are still the people who have a better holistic overview who can do better decisions on the whole run. So that essence, that entrepreneurial essence will stay, but how we handle this will be significantly different.
Yeah. Approximately 70% of quality achieved by very lean, small companies of, let's say, under 50 people. Will we have more companies of those types, or will we have more companies that will be even smaller?
In the end, this is a complex question. I'm not sure I can fully answer that. My take is that I would separate the way of working from organizational size. So I think that way of working right now just works for tiny startups because the quality is not good enough to really be, you don't want to put your reputation on that bar of quality. If you're just starting out, that's fine. But if you're more mature, you have a higher quality bar. And this is where the AI is not fully there yet. So I think, though, it will get there. And then I think that way of working will be adopted by all sizes of organizations. And there are many advantages of a larger company, from distribution channels to brand awareness, and which are independent of how you work. So I would expect that still larger companies expect or have a different profile and can also have, for example, more redundancy, have a higher buzz factor. So there are many things which are advantages if you really care about stability, reliability. This is just really hard if you're two people team. Then if one is out, then you have already a problem, even though AI can help a lot, but it's just really hard to deliver that quality and reliability over time.
I guess an interesting point to think about for our listeners is what is exact percentage that they are targeting. Because for enterprises, yes, you do want to have 99. But when we are thinking about smaller SMBs, maybe introducing 70% automated solution would suffice. And at the same time, that would also mean that there is no need for additional headcount, for example. To first get the SMB customers on board and then see what direction it goes to. Would you agree?
I agree. And I would advocate for focusing on what happens with the other 30% or 50 or 60 or whatever it is. Right? This is just a random number. And so if it works well, great. But what happens with the other part? And in our situation, this is a lot of effort goes actually into handling that other part. It's for us, for example, you can hand it over to a human agent. You can ask a human agent to jump in and support the AI agent, right? It's all kinds of ways how you can ensure when the, let's say, fails, that it's still a good experience. So for example, in our case also, if the AI is just unsure, then it's better to not say you're unsure, but then still involve a human to make sure it's really reliable and that the answer is correct. So I can really advocate for thinking about how to handle a failing system.
Yeah. I see what you mean, and can assume that something that you can see with the customers is that these most problematic cases are not only the part of the technology, but also maybe the part of the underlying processes in the company. To be more specific on an example, if we constantly see that a certain request is landing into the very problematic zone, then apparently there is no documentation around it. Or the process that is behind is also not standardized enough to put it in the automation or to put it into certain agentic system that also Parloa can enable.
Very good point. Yeah, often people or companies want to be customer centered, but sometimes the foundation is just not there. So while people reaching out for a certain problem, you could help it, you could add it just to self-service, but you not that you don't want to, but you're just not aware that this is a problem. And this is also where AI agents are really great, because all of a sudden you can have a much better analysis. You can at scale do qualitative research, which was really hard before. And all of a sudden you can surface these insights, which customers are really grateful for. So I totally share that point. It's not that they by intention don't have this right now, but it's just often lack of information to address their customers' needs.
And do you think that there is a certain, well, we will call it metric or KPI for now, but a certain vector of this qualitative research that you see very often recurring in the customer setups that is underestimated?
A pattern for qualitative research, I would say the biggest pattern for that qualitative research is that right now, the analysis also in contact centers, there is usually already some kind of categorization. And these categories are usually really high level. So they help you to group where the requests are coming from, but they don't help you understand the why. And usually in each of these groups, there's a ton of different why people are calling. And right now, the analysis, how they're run in the industry, struggle to explain the why. And so it's also much harder to understand the root cause of this. And the key insight now is that large language models help to formulate this much more crisp and are able to categorize on a much more granular level, and are able to, by looking at a larger amount of data and aggregating them, also say these are actually the relevant points. But by looking not at these categories, but looking at the raw conversations, this contains more of the richness of the customer problem.
I can see what you mean, especially since voice AI is rather new interface, and I would apply the analogy of using website as the entry point to your enterprise. We have learned how to track certain things on your website. What was the browsers that the person was using? What was the device? What exact parts of the website were reviewed? When it comes to voice assistants, it is a very interesting point that I've never thought about that you have right now highlighted. So why and what has specifically brought this person to calling? And there is no clear way of measuring this, right?
Yeah, I mean, luckily there are ways to measure this, but I do want to double down on what you said, because with the UI, when you look at the UI, you look at a click path, and then you might see, oh, there's a big dropout at step 3. Then you still don't know the why. You don't know why that person initially came. You just can interpret certain motivations through the click path. But the beauty of natural language is the users tells you what their problem is. So you can really understand what they have as a challenge, therefore address the solution you offer much more tailored to the actual problem they're facing, not by some hypothesis around it, which might be true and just might not be true. So the level you can drill in to understand the why is much richer in natural conversations than you have it in normal UI analysis.
That is very true. You never know the intent. Is it a real intent of the person entering your website? But when someone is starting the conversation, they explicitly tell you about what is the request like. That is very interesting and very true. Let's take just the hypothetical example of a certain customer and of what you will be recommending this company to actually review and track to get the most efficient results after the research in this area.
Yeah. Common metrics in industry are first caller resolution. Do people call again, or do they call again because it didn't work out? So how many touch points does it need to resolve a certain case? Within the conversation, you have task resolution, which is a metric where you track, were you actually able to deliver that task, or did you need to have additional support or call back? And then there's the average handling time, which is the key metric in the industry, usually centered around humans, because essentially that's the speed, how quickly they can solve a certain problem. But in our cases, of course, how much can you How much work can you automate already, which is for easy wins are usually just would get started is, well, you authenticate the user and you reach the right person already. Like this is like a no-brainer you get on the first day, super easy. But then you can really grow into what kind of challenges can you automate, you can really bring to the AI. So the human can really focus on those where they're really strong at, empathic responses, tricky situations, more complex situations, and also, of course, help the AI get better. So the average handling times, especially of humans, is usually the biggest, most important metric in the industry. So far, customer service is often seen as a cost center. And what I really believe in, it's not limited to that. It can be also a revenue center, and it can be a unit which helps build loyalty, brand loyalty, because you create all of a sudden a better connection with your end customers. You understand them, you get their context, you can help them along where really it's helpful for them. So you don't only have a touch point when the customer is really frustrated and eventually reaches out to the phone where they often have minutes of waiting time, but you are in a constant. You have your personal AI agent with which you have a continuing conversation, which really helps you along your entire journey. Not only when you have a big problem, you want to purchase something, but you are just there the entire time. And these connections will really fundamentally change how we interact with brands and how also customer interactions, conversations are seen within companies.
I'm smiling just because it is such a beautiful view on the process, and definitely more revitalizing for those ones who are struggling with the current workloads of theirs when it comes to customer support. So now you have mentioned that you see that the future of our interactions with certain brands, with certain companies, would be also having potentially the element of voice AI, meaning the potential of the certain element of innovation. What is your current ballpark in terms of how many people would prefer to talk to AI and how many people would prefer to talk to the real human? Definitely including the facts of when they are calling, for example, at the weekend, and then not having the human involved. Having what exact state-of-the-art technology you see when it comes to AI resolution of certain cases. Do you have a certain percentage?
Yeah, and I guess the reality is people are different from a people perspective and from each use case. They are different. I don't see people as they always have just one channel, but it's a multi-channel experience. And you have all these touch points. Sometimes it's text better, it's voice better. On the website, you want to reach out via app, right? All these touch points, they are good and they complement the entire. Then to that question of if they prefer a human or an AI agent, this drastically is impacted if the agent delivers. We see all these, when you ask people, well, how was your last chatbot experience? And usually you see a face which is super unhappy. Well, and then you ask them, how was your last ChatGPT experience? And then they smile like, that's a really helpful tool. And this is the same thing we're seeing right now from that shift in the industry from, I learned how to get away from that chatbots in the fastest way to, it's actually really helpful. So just name an example, Barmenia, so the German health insurance. When they introduced AI agents, the NPS went up 180%. So not because the humans aren't great. No, of course they are great, but it just takes a lot of time to get there. To search for information, they're just slower than an AI agent is. The agent is always the first call of the day. They're right there. They're empathic. So the overall experience seemed to resonate really, really well. So I think it's a really multidimensional view on this, and you need to look at the final outcome of each implementation and how it's really delivering on that one as well.
Yeah, it is also something interesting that you have pointed out, namely that generally the companies, at least from my experience, have been looking into the topic for several years. And at the same time, not getting that much of an incremental benefit of investing the time into trying to improve the resolution rate. But then currently, since the revolution in the voice AI technology if you look into the charts, even crazier than the ChatGPT adoption, at least from the prices per token, then it is definitely also worth thinking that the effort that has been put before might be having completely different outputs just based on the fact that it is different modality, it is different way of approaching the problem.
Yeah, indeed, it's a really different approach, how you can run conversations, how much you can address the messy conversations, but still get it back on track to resolve the actual problem.
That has been exactly my experience with voice assistants so far, especially since I'm, curious about how they work. That is why I'm trying to not exactly hack them, because if you're saying something, it's not exactly the prompt attack or something, but to make it speak more, to try to deviate it. And to be honest, it's almost always working. That is why I would be curious on what exact, very concrete voice technologies you are using in your daily life. And well, what helps you to be more efficient, what doesn't. That is definitely helpful to other folks who are willing to also adopt the keyboard-free approach. And what is your general feeling towards what we will be using in the future of voice space?
So I have to admit, I talk a lot with my machines, really different with each one. So I think as humans, we learn quickly what can the other side understand, what can it work with, and then you adapt accordingly. So with Alexa, Google Assistant at home, I do simple things like starting music or setting a timer, and I don't do anything more complicated because they can't, and I know this, so I react accordingly. Then I do talk a lot with my computer, actually, because I just think it's a really efficient way how I can give input to my computer. So I use different transcription tools. So my key flow is actually, well, I mean, several setups in my computer, but the key flow is always I say something and then a large language model gets it into the shape I actually want it to be. So a tiny transcription error doesn't matter, but the key message is there. For example, when I write code, it's much easier for me to give a vast amount of context to the AI agents. And if some words are transcribed wrong, it doesn't matter because I give so much more context. And then, however, the large language model is actually getting it into the shape where it's needed. And this can be for text, for writing a strategy, right? It's always that co-pilot approach in my world. And that's serving me really well. So I like to speak to my computer because this is the fastest I can express my thoughts. And I like to read on the other side because I can read faster than I can listen. Most of my work goes with these modalities.
So for our last question, with your ongoing expansion to the US market, I'm seeing different new positions opening up. What is up in the roadmap for Parloa?
Yeah, so for Parloa, we have, on the one hand side, really doubling down on the US market. Our New York office is building out significantly. We see massive and faster adoption also in the US than in Europe. People are seeing AI more as an opportunity. We see it as a mixed thing between opportunity and threat in Europe. US is a key market for us. We are, let's say, on 3 stages. So the first one is, okay, there's actually incoming calls and you help to resolve them, to turning customer service into revenue drivers, and then to redefining the entire customer experience along the entire customer lifecycle. And this is super fascinating to see how it's spanning out over time. So if you want to join us as a developer, or of course also in our go-to-market team, happy to hear from you and make that story a reality. And this is, a really, really interesting time to be in that industry and to shape that industry as a whole.
That is definitely so motivating to hear it for each and every listener of AI Ketchup. Thank you so much, Stefan, for your time today and sharing your insights. I will also include your LinkedIn profile into the show notes. Wishing you to have a wonderful week ahead and to gather even more and more interesting voice interactions for your customers.
Thank you, Lina. It was nice to be here. Thank you.